The cameras were merciless. Their clicks echoed like gunfire against the velvet ropes, each flash a burst of artificial lightning illuminating the millionaire's flawless smile. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, the grand premiere of the film he financed, the night he would cement his name not just as a businessman, but as a man of culture, relevance, power. And on his arm the actress. She glittered under the strobes, draped in silver satin that seemed poured over her body. Her laughter rang like crystal breaking. Deliberate and practiced, the kind of sound designed for microphones. He leaned close to whisper something in her ear, and she tilted her head, offering the world a performance of intimacy. The crowd swallowed it whole. What no one saw was the shadow at the edge of the carpet, a woman who once knew that smile better than anyone. His wife, or rather the woman he had left behind. She had not been invited, not even thought of. But here she was, and in her arms, bundled against the cool night air, were two infants. The first murmurs spread through the crowd before the photographers noticed her. A ripple of confusion, then recognition, then disbelief. When the camera lights finally swung in her direction, silence fell for a breathless second, as though the world itself needed time to register what was happening. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. The wife stepped forward slowly, her eyes fixed not on the actress, not even on the husband, but on the carpet beneath her feet. Each step was deliberate, an act of defiance against humiliation. She did not dress for spectacle, no jewels, no gowns. A simple dark dress clung to her, practical and unassuming. But in her arms, the children glowed with innocence, their tiny faces shielded from the frenzy by her steady hands. "Is that?" one reporter stammered. "Oh my God, it's her," another whispered. The millionaire froze. For the first time that evening, his smile faltered. His grip on the actress's arm tightened, betraying the calm exterior he tried so desperately to hold. The actress followed his gaze, and her practiced expression cracked, the corners of her lips twitching downward into something dangerously close to fear. The cameras came alive again, not for him, not for the starlet in silver, but for the woman they had forgotten. Flashes erupted, reporters shouted questions like bullets. "Who are the babies? Are those yours? Did you know she would be here?" The millionaire raised his chin, attempting to smother the chaos with arrogance. "She doesn't belong here," he hissed under his breath. But the microphones caught it. The wife finally lifted her gaze, her eyes locking on his. No words passed her lips, but the message was unmistakable. "You cannot erase me. You cannot erase them." The actress shifted uncomfortably, tugging her arm free. She had signed up for glamour, for magazine covers, for being adored. Not for this, not for scandal, not for the sight of two children whose resemblance to the man beside her was undeniable. The crowd had chosen its side. Reporters surged toward the wife, lenses zeroing in on the infants. The noise grew deafening, a storm of voices crashing together, desperate to capture the headline of the decade. He tried to move forward, to drag the actress toward the theater entrance, but his steps faltered when he realized the cameras no longer followed. They remained locked on the wife. His moment, the one he had orchestrated with money, power, and vanity, and was slipping away. "Leave," he mouthed, his jaw tight. His voice low and sharp, but she didn't. Instead, she adjusted the babies in her arms, stepped closer to the blinding lights, and allowed the crowd to see her fully. Her composure was not born of revenge, not yet, but of survival. The last image before the theater doors closed behind him was the one that would flood every screen by morning. The betrayed wife standing tall beneath the lights, two infants in her arms while the millionaire turned his back to the world. And in that silence, heavy and cutting, the story truly began. The flashes still burned in her mind. Even as she stood on that red carpet, defiant beneath the cameras, her thoughts drifted backward, to a time before the glare, before the betrayal. A time when love felt steady, when marriage was not yet fractured by ambition. She remembered their first home, a small apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaky sink that always seemed to groan at night. Back then it didn't matter. He would fix it himself. Sleeves rolled to his elbows, grease under his nails, and she would sit cross-legged on the floor, reading aloud to keep him company. They had nothing, but together it felt like everything. He wasn't a millionaire then. He was simply her husband, a man with restless dreams and a stubborn grin. She believed in those dreams even when they seemed too big. He'd speak of owning buildings, of funding projects, of one day making the world know his name. She laughed, not because she doubted him, but because she thought ambition couldn't change the gentleman who once kissed her knuckles before bed. But ambition does not whisper. It shouts. It began with late nights at the office. At first, he'd call to reassure her. "Don't wait up. I'll be home soon." And she would smile into the receiver whispering, "Just don't forget me." "I could never forget you," he'd reply, his voice warm. For a while, those words sustained her, but warmth began to cool, replaced by clipped tones and unanswered texts. He worked later, traveled farther, stayed away longer. The man who once rushed home to share dinner at their rickety kitchen table now sent curt messages. "Busy. Tomorrow." She tried to ignore the unease. She decorated their home with care, filling it with small touches meant to tether him back. Framed photographs, fresh flowers, his favorite meals. But when he walked through the door, she noticed his eyes sliding past these details, landing instead on his phone, his laptop, his schedule. Her heart ached in quiet ways. Night stretched endlessly as she lay awake, listening to the clock tick toward dawn. Sometimes she'd wake to find the other side of the bed still cold, his suit draped across a chair, his scent lingering faintly of expensive whiskey in places she hadn't been invited. And yet, she forgave. Again and again she forgave. Because marriages are built on patience, aren't they? Because she loved him, and love meant waiting, hoping, believing that this was only a season. One evening, as she folded laundry, he stood at the window, staring at the city lights. "We could have more," he said suddenly. She looked up. "We already do." He shook his head. "No, more, money, recognition, power, I can feel it. It's right there if I just reach far enough." His words unsettled her, not because of the hunger in them, but because of the distance she felt in his voice. It wasn't the dreamer she married speaking anymore. It was a man who had already begun building a world without her. Still, she tucked the unease away. She folded it like one more shirt in the basket, neatly pressed, pretending it belonged. She told herself things would steady again once he reached whatever summit he chased. But summits, she would learn, have no end. The memory blurred. The warmth of their humble beginning dissolving into the chill of what came after. She blinked, pulled back into the present where the red carpet flashes still echoed in her ears. He had once promised her the world, and now as the cameras turned on her with ruthless hunger, she realized he had only ever wanted it for himself. Somewhere in the crowd, another face would soon enter her life. A woman wrapped in glamour, with secrets hidden in her smile. The actress. The memory of his words lingered like smoke. Money, recognition, power. She hadn't understood then just how far those cravings would carry him, or who they would bring into their lives. It happened on a humid evening in June. He had invited her to one of his business dinners, though by now, she knew that meant a performance, not a meal. She still went, out of duty, out of hope that her presence might remind him of who he once was. The restaurant was all glass walls and candlelight, filled with voices that spoke too loudly of money. She adjusted her dress at the table, waiting for him to return from greeting his guests. When he finally came back, he wasn't alone. "This," he said, resting a hand lightly at the back of a young woman in emerald silk, "is someone you're going to love." The woman smiled, a smile too polished to be real yet warm enough to disarm. "This is my wife," he added, as if the word wife was a footnote, a formality.
"And this
is Evelyn." The name slid off his tongue too easily. Evelyn. The wife extended her hand. The actress's grip was delicate. Her nails painted the color of blood. "It's such an honor," Evelyn said, her voice low, husky, trained to hold attention. "He's told me so much about you." "Has he?" she asked, her tone calm though her stomach tightened. "Oh yes," Evelyn replied, a small laugh escaping. "He said you're the reason he works so hard, that everything he builds is for you." She forced a smile, but her eyes darted to her husband. He was already watching Evelyn, not her, his lips tugged in the faintest grin. The dinner unfolded with champagne and expensive courses she barely touched. Evelyn spoke animatedly about her upcoming auditions, the film industry, the roles she hoped to play. The husband listened with an intensity she hadn't seen in months, his eyes lit in admiration. He leaned closer to her across the table, their voices dropping into private tones. The wife sat silent, her fork tracing circles in untouched sauce. Each time Evelyn laughed, her husband laughed with her. They shared inside jokes, ones she couldn't possibly understand, jokes born from conversations that must have started long before tonight. Her heart sank in tiny increments. It wasn't what they said, but the rhythm of it, the rhythm of people who had already begun speaking a language that excluded her. When Evelyn excused herself to the powder room, she finally spoke. "You seem close." He looked at her with feigned surprise. "She's business. That's all. She's talented, she's ambitious. She could be the face of the next project. The way you look at her doesn't feel like business." He sighed, exasperated. "Don't start. Don't ruin tonight with your paranoia. Do you know how much I risked to bring these opportunities to us? Evelyn is a connection. Nothing more." She lowered her voice. "Connections don't usually come with inside jokes." His eyes hardened. "You've always been insecure. That's your problem, not mine." The words cut deeper than he knew. Insecurity. As though her instincts were flaws, her suspicions mere shadows of a weak mind. She swallowed the pain and nodded, refusing to give him the satisfaction of tears. Evelyn returned, her perfume preceding her like a storm. The actress touched the husband's arm lightly as she sat, and he didn't pull away. The rest of the evening blurred. Laughter, wine, a performance she couldn't applaud. By the time they left, the wife felt like a ghost drifting beside them, silent and invisible. That night, lying awake in the cold stretch of their bed, she replayed the dinner in her mind. Evelyn's laughter, his gaze, the word insecure echoing until her chest ached. Something had shifted. A seed had been planted. And though she wanted to deny it, she knew the truth. Betrayal doesn't arrive with thunder. It begins with whispers, with glances, with seeds. And soon those seeds would grow into something far darker. The memory of Evelyn's laughter still echoed in her head. It had been weeks since that dinner. Yet every glance they shared across the table replayed like a wound she couldn't close. She had tried to bring it up gently, to ask questions without accusation. But each time his response chipped away at her sense of reality. It began small. "You imagine things," he said one night, loosening his tie in the mirror. "You always have." "I saw the way you looked at her," she whispered. He turned, eyes narrowing. "You saw what you wanted to see. That's the problem with you. You twist everything." Her chest tightened. He had once reassured her, promised love with every word. Now every sentence felt like a trap, designed to make her doubt herself. The warmth of their home dissolved. Dinner conversations became icy silences, broken only by the clink of silverware. He no longer asked about her day, no longer touched her hand across the table. Instead, he scrolled through his phone, smiling faintly at messages she couldn't see. When she confronted him, he laughed. Not the laugh she once loved, but sharp, mocking. "You think every woman is a threat. Do you know how exhausting that is? Living with your jealousy? I'm not jealous. I'm insecure," he cut in. "You've always been insecure, and it's holding me back. Do you understand that? You're suffocating me with your paranoia." Her lips trembled, but no sound escaped. His words lodged deep inside her, splintering her confidence. She began to wonder if she really was too suspicious, too needy, too small for the man he was becoming. Nights stretched longer. He often returned past midnight, his cologne sharper, his explanations smoother. Meetings ran late. Investors flew in. "You wouldn't understand, it's business." And when she pressed further, his temper flared. "Stop interrogating me. I'm not some criminal you get to question. I'm building something bigger than both of us, and all you do is drag me down." She sat alone afterward, staring at the cold food on the table, questioning herself. Am I dragging him down? Am I the reason he's distant? In those quiet hours, she replayed their early years, searching for proof that she hadn't imagined his love. She recalled the laughter in their tiny apartment, the promises whispered in the dark. Were those memories real or just illusions she clung to? Her reflection in the mirror grew foreign. Shadows carved beneath her eyes, her smile fading into something brittle. She adjusted her dress one evening before he arrived, hoping he might notice, hoping he might see her again. He walked in, glanced at her once, and muttered, "You're overdressed. We're not going anywhere." Then, without another word, he disappeared into his study. Tears welled but never fell. She was tired of crying into pillows that smelled of him but no longer felt like home. Instead, she began to silence herself, to stop asking questions, to live as though invisible. The actress's name appeared more often in casual conversation. Evelyn said this. Evelyn thinks that. He claimed it was work, but the way he spoke carried reverence. She recognized it because he used to speak of her that way. One night, lying beside him in the dark, she whispered, "Do you even love me anymore?" He exhaled sharply. "Love isn't enough. Not for men like me." She turned away, heart pounding, the final piece falling into place. He didn't just want ambition, he wanted freedom. Freedom from her, from their vows, from the life they built together. And soon, that freedom would come in the form of papers signed in silence. The silence between them had grown unbearable, a presence louder than any argument. She learned to move carefully through their home, like a guest rather than a wife. Each night he returned later, each morning he left earlier. The warmth of a shared life had cooled into the chill of strangers passing in the same hallway, and then without warning, it arrived. The envelope sat on the kitchen table, cream-colored and heavy. Her name typed in black letters across the front. She opened it with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the sharp, sterile words until they blurred. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her chest tightened. It was not a conversation, not even a warning. Just paper. Cold, indifferent paper, declaring the end of vows once spoken beneath soft light and promise. When he came home that evening, she held the envelope in her hands. "What is this?" Her voice cracked despite her effort to remain steady. He loosened his cufflinks, not even looking at her. "It's what you wanted, isn't it? You've been miserable for months." "No," she whispered. "This isn't what I wanted. I wanted us. I wanted honesty." He finally looked at her, his expression one of irritation rather than sorrow. "You're impossible to please, insecure, always suspicious. You turned this marriage into a cage. I won't live in it anymore." The words struck harder than the papers themselves. He didn't speak of betrayal, of Evelyn, of the lies she had endured. Instead, he placed the blame squarely at her feet. "You could have fought for us," she said weakly. "I did," he snapped, "but you were too busy questioning me. This is your fault." She stared at him, searching for the man she once knew. But all she saw was a stranger wearing his face. The days that followed revealed the cruelty of influence. Friends she thought loyal began to drift. Some stopped answering calls. Others delivered polite excuses about being caught in the middle. But she knew the truth. His wealth had already redrawn the lines of loyalty. At dinner parties, she heard the whispers. She drove him away. She was jealous. She couldn't handle his success. Lies spread like wildfire, and she was left to watch her character burn while he stood unscathed. She tried to defend herself, to explain the truth, but her words carried little weight against his reputation. He was charming in public, generous with acquaintances, powerful in every room he entered. She was just the discarded wife, painted as bitter and unstable. One afternoon, she visited a friend she had known since school. "You believe me, don't you?" she asked, desperation leaking through her voice. The friend hesitated, glancing down at her hands. "It's complicated. He's been helping my husband with business. We can't afford to take sides." Her stomach dropped. Even her oldest bonds were no match for his influence. Nights grew lonelier. She sat at the kitchen table staring at the papers, unwilling to sign yet powerless to stop the tide. She felt herself fading, her voice, her place, her worth all stripped away piece by piece. And yet beneath the despair, a flicker of resolve began to grow. He had silenced her in court documents, in social circles, in the eyes of friends, but he could not silence the truth of what she carried inside her body. A truth he hadn't yet discovered. Her hand instinctively brushed across her abdomen. The faintest swell only she could feel. The papers declared an ending. But within her, something new was beginning. Fragile, secret, undeniable. The papers still lay on the kitchen table, unsigned, their edges curling slightly under the weight of days. She passed them each morning like a ghost drifting through a mausoleum, but her gaze no longer lingered on the black and white words. Her attention had shifted inward, to the quiet rhythm growing inside her. At first, she mistook the nausea for stress, the weariness for grief. But when the pattern became undeniable, she bought the test in secret, hiding it beneath bread and fruit in her shopping bag. She waited until night when the house was silent, when he was gone again, as he always was. The result appeared quickly, clear as day. Positive. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the bathroom floor. Tears slid down her cheeks, but they were not of sorrow alone. They carried something heavier, something sharper, the realization that she carried a piece of him still, even as he discarded her. When he returned that night, humming faintly from wine, she said nothing. He tossed his jacket across a chair, loosening his tie, his phone buzzing with messages she didn't ask about. He never noticed her silence. He never noticed her trembling hand resting on her stomach. The next morning, over coffee, she finally spoke. "There's something I could tell you." He glanced up briefly. "Is it another accusation?" Her lips parted, then closed. She shook her head. "No, nothing," he smirked, dismissing her entirely. "Then don't waste my time." And just like that, she made her decision. He would never know. The pregnancy became her private rebellion, a truth she wrapped carefully in silence. While he paraded Evelyn across magazine covers, she counted weeks in solitude, each day solidifying her resolve. He had stolen her reputation, her friends, her marriage, but he would not steal this. She began to imagine the babies as shields, small but mighty, protecting her from despair. In the evenings, she whispered to them in the quiet of her room. "You're mine," she murmured, hands resting over her abdomen. "Not his. He doesn't deserve you." Nights were no longer empty. They were filled with quiet conversations between mother and unborn child, promises spoken into the dark. The world saw her as discarded, broken, humiliated. But inside, she carried a secret that defied his narrative. He said she was insecure, paranoid, unworthy. Yet here she was, nurturing life, holding proof of everything he tried to erase. As her body changed, she avoided places where she might be recognized. Friends had already abandoned her. She wouldn't give them another story to sell on his behalf. Instead, she lived small but steady, finding strength in preparing for the children's arrival. The first kick startled her one night, a flutter against her ribs. She laughed softly, pressing her palm to the spot. "You're stronger than me already," she whispered. Her reflection in the mirror no longer looked like the woman who begged for his attention. She looked like someone carrying a purpose greater than revenge, greater than pain. Still, beneath the hope, a current of anger pulsed. He would continue to live freely, untarnished, his empire expanding. He would attend galas with Evelyn, smile for the cameras, receive applause. And one day she knew the sight of these children would shatter that carefully built image. She did not know when. She did not know how. But she knew the moment would come, for now she chose silence. The secret grew quietly, week by week, as the papers on the table gathered dust. And while the world celebrated his movie, his fortune, his actress, she carried the only truth that mattered, her babies. The months of her quiet pregnancy passed unnoticed by him. He never called, never asked, never wondered. While she whispered to her children in the dark, he was busy writing a different story, one staged beneath the brightest lights. The headlines told it all. Self-made millionaire funds film starring rising star. Photos splashed across glossy pages, him in tailored suits, Evelyn on his arm in gowns shimmering like liquid fire. Their smiles looked effortless, their hands always grazing as if the world itself had conspired to keep them side by side. Magazines praised their chemistry. "A power couple in the making," one article declared. "She is the muse to his empire, the face of his legacy." The words burned when she read them, yet she couldn't look away. She sat at her small kitchen table clipping coupons for baby formula, while the television played interviews of him laughing beside Evelyn. "It's all about partnership," he said smoothly. "She inspires me," she whispered to the curve of her stomach. "Once that was me." But the world didn't remember. To the public, the wife was a forgotten footnote, erased and replaced with an actress wrapped in silk. His empire expanded beyond the film. He purchased penthouses, acquired companies, and posed for magazine covers. Each photo spread reinforced the illusion. A visionary husband, an adored starlet, a life shimmering with success. At a launch party broadcast on entertainment networks, Evelyn pressed her lips to the microphone. "He believed in me before anyone else did. This movie wouldn't exist without him." Reporters clapped. He kissed her cheek on camera, and the image looped endlessly online. Meanwhile, she decorated a nursery in muted colors, folding tiny clothes into drawers with hands steadier than she felt. Each headline that praised his love for Evelyn only fueled her determination. He had chosen glitter, but she carried truth. One evening, a reporter asked him directly, "Do you regret your past marriage?" He smiled thinly, eyes flashing toward the camera. "Regret is wasted energy. I've only ever moved forward." The wife sat frozen, hearing the final erasure. He hadn't just left her. He had rewritten her out of his story entirely. Still, she found a strange comfort in his blindness. He believed she was gone, insignificant, powerless. That ignorance became her shield. While he basked in cameras, she grew stronger in silence, her children now steady heartbeats anchoring her through every lonely day. The film neared completion. Billboards lit the skyline with Evelyn's face. Trailers flooded every screen, his name rolling in credits as executive producer. The premiere date was announced with feverish anticipation. The event of the season, the media called it. She read the articles late at night, the glow of her phone casting shadows across the nursery wall. The world would gather for him. The cameras would worship him. The red carpet would celebrate his perfect lie. But she knew something the cameras didn't. And as the date of the premiere drew closer, she began to plan. The nursery had become her world. Days blurred into feedings, lullabies, and the soft weight of her babies asleep against her chest. In those quiet hours, she almost convinced herself the world outside no longer mattered. Almost. Because the world did not stop speaking his name. The tabloids arrived uninvited at grocery checkouts, plastered with his face. Interviews ran on television, always staged with Evelyn at his side. At first, she tried to ignore them, shielding her eyes from the glossy lies. But soon, other stories slipped through the cracks, darker ones. An assistant mysteriously resigned after accusing him of verbal abuse. A studio employee hinted at late-night screaming matches between him and Evelyn. A blind gossip column suggested he was still chasing women behind Evelyn's back. Slipping into hotels under false names, she read every word. Each rumor fueled something inside her. Not relief, not schadenfreude, but resolve. He was not the untouchable man the magazines worshipped. The cracks were already forming. And when the time came, her truth would split him wide open. At night, she rocked her babies to sleep and whispered promises into the dark. "You'll never know the cruelty he gave me. You'll only see the strength he forced me to find." The children grew quickly, their small hands grasping hers, their cries filling the silence that once haunted her. With every milestone, the first smile, the first laugh, she found new strength. They weren't burdens. They were proof. Proof that his narrative was a lie, that the life he paraded was built on betrayal. One afternoon, while folding laundry, the phone rang. An old friend's voice hesitated on the other end. "I shouldn't be calling, but he isn't who he pretends to be." She closed her eyes, clutching the receiver. "I already know. He's cruel to everyone. Even Evelyn. But no one will say it aloud. Not when he holds so much power." Her lips curved faintly. "Power doesn't last forever." The friend's silence was heavy, but she didn't fill it. She had said enough. Her planning began in fragments. She clipped articles and tucked them into a drawer, notes of his scandals carefully preserved. She studied the timing of his premieres, the rhythm of his public appearances. She watched, waited, and pieced together the image he wanted the world to see. She also pieced together the image she would reveal, not gossip, not rumor, but undeniable living proof. Late at night, when both children finally slept, she stood at the mirror. She traced the lines of her face, softened by sleeplessness yet sharpened by resolve. He thought he had erased her. He thought she was too weak, too insecure, too insignificant. He was wrong. And the longer she remained silent, the more devastating her return would be. The world adored his romance with Evelyn. But one day cameras would turn away from the gowns and the champagne. They would see her. They would see the children who bore his blood. And in that moment, the empire he built on betrayal would begin to collapse. She lifted her babies from their crib, holding them close. "You're my proof," she whispered. "My shield. My weapon." Outside, the city buzzed with news of the premiere, the film that would crown him untouchable. But in the shadows of her small home, She was preparing for a different story, the story where she stepped into the light. The night of the premiere arrived like a storm she had been waiting years to face. For weeks she had imagined it, rehearsed it in her mind, felt it in her chest with every beat of determination. Now as the city lit up in neon and the theater prepared for its grand unveiling, she dressed not for spectacle but for truth. She chose simplicity, a black dress, modest and elegant, without shimmer or silk. No diamonds glimmered at her throat, no bracelets caught the light. Her hair was pinned neatly, her face unpainted except for the faintest touch of resolve in her eyes. She had no need for costumes. She had the only accessories that mattered, the 2 children in her arms. The babies stirred softly as she fastened their small coats. She pressed her lips to their foreheads. "Tonight the world sees you," she whispered. And him. Outside the street was ablaze with light. Limousines rolled to the carpet, spilling out men in tuxedos and women draped in sequins. The cameras feasted, flashing in a frenzy as reporters shouted names. He arrived moments later, hand firmly at Evelyn's back, both smiling as if carved from perfection. Applause rippled through the crowd, but then she stepped forward. It was a single motion, quiet, unannounced, and yet it silenced the night. The reporters saw her first, a familiar face they had all but forgotten. Their voices stumbled over her name before rising in unison. "She's here. My God, it's her." The cameras swiveled, their lenses locking on her like weapons. Light exploded across the carpet. She tightened her hold on her babies, keeping their faces shielded but their presence undeniable. The millionaire froze mid-step. His smile faltered, his polished facade cracking at the edges. Evelyn followed his gaze, her expression slipping from performance into something raw, confusion, then dread. The reporters shouted over each other, questions piercing the night. "Whose children are those? Did you know she would come? Are you hiding something?" He tried to pull Evelyn forward to keep walking, but the cameras refused to follow. The story had shifted. He was no longer the star of his own premiere. She was. Her steps were deliberate, unhurried. Each one carried the weight of betrayal survived, of humiliation endured, of truth carried in silence until this moment. She didn't look at Evelyn. She barely looked at him. Her gaze remained steady on the blinding lights ahead, her composure unshaken. A reporter's microphone nearly grazed her arm. "Why are you here tonight?" She stopped just for a moment. The crowd held its breath. "For them," she said simply, adjusting the babies in her arms. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. The microphones caught every syllable, sending her words into the storm of cameras, into the homes of everyone who had ever believed his lie. He hissed from behind clenched teeth, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You don't belong here." But she turned her head, meeting his eyes with a calmness that unsettled him more than rage ever could. "Neither do you." The actress's hand slipped from his arm. She glanced nervously toward the press, aware that the image being captured would haunt her career. He reached for her, but her hesitation was already recorded in the flashing bulbs. The wife moved again, walking past them, past the velvet ropes, toward the theater doors. She did not need to shout. She did not need to accuse. Her presence alone was the accusation, and as the doors opened before her, the cameras kept firing, capturing the image that would flood every front page by morning. The forgotten wife reclaiming the spotlight, carrying in her arms the truth he could no longer deny. The theater lobby swelled with noise, a storm of flashes and voices that refused to die down. She had stepped into the light and the world would not look away. Reporters pressed forward, microphones thrust like spears, cameras flaring with relentless hunger. The actress faltered first. Evelyn's polished smile quivered, her eyes darting between the wife, the babies, and the man beside her. For months she had played the role of perfection, the adored starlet, the true love in a carefully staged story. But now, every glance at the children chipped at her performance. Their resemblance was undeniable, small mirrors of the man who stood frozen at her side. He tried to steady her with a hand at her elbow, but she recoiled slightly, the cameras catching the gesture. That single movement sent a ripple of whispers through the crowd. Then he turned to the wife, his eyes burning. His voice was low, but the microphones caught every syllable. "You planned this," he hissed. "You're trying to destroy me." She didn't flinch. She simply held the babies closer, her silence louder than accusation. The reporters erupted. Destroy you? What is she talking about? Are these your children? Why didn't you acknowledge them before? His jaw tightened. They're not mine, he snapped, the words slipping too quickly. The crowd gasped. The wife finally lifted her head, meeting his gaze. Her voice was calm, steady, devastating. They have your eyes. The flashbulbs exploded. Evelyn's face drained of color. She tried to smile, to redirect attention, but her lips trembled. This isn't the time, she began, but no one was listening. The narrative had shifted. The millionaire's mask cracked further. Sweat beaded along his temple, his practiced smile twisting into a grimace. You always wanted to ruin me, he spat. Even now you can't stand to see me succeed. The microphones captured it all. The venom in his voice, the edge of panic lacing his words. For years he had painted her as insecure, paranoid, unstable. But tonight the world saw something different. They saw a man unraveling and a woman who didn't need to shout to expose him. She rocked one of the babies gently as the cries began to rise. The sound pierced through the frenzy, silencing even the most aggressive reporters for a heartbeat. It was proof more powerful than any headline, proof no denial could erase. Evelyn stepped back, her hands trembling. She looked at him with something close to fear. The cameras swung to catch it, immortalizing her hesitation. In that single image, actress recoiling, husband sweating, wife unshaken with children in her arms, the illusion shattered. The theater manager tried to restore order, guiding guests inside, but the chaos spilled across the carpet. Questions rained down like bullets. How long have you hidden them? Did you abandon your family for Evelyn? What does this mean for your marriage? He shoved past the reporters, barking, "No comment!" His voice cracked, brittle against the relentless storm. She did not chase him. She simply walked slowly, deliberately toward the cameras, allowing them to see the truth he had tried to bury. For the first time, she felt no shame. No fear, only clarity. His empire, built on lies and silken illusions, was collapsing in real time, not with thunder, but with the simple weight of truth. As the doors to the theater finally closed behind him, leaving him cornered by his own scandal, she lingered outside for one final moment. The flashes illuminated her children's faces, capturing the image that would sweep across every paper by morning. And in that light, his empire began to fall. The night did not end when the theater doors closed. If anything, the storm only gathered force. Reporters lingered on the carpet, their voices overlapping, their questions multiplying. Headlines were already being written in real time, every photograph uploaded, every whispered rumor sharpening into certainty. She didn't move quickly. There was no need. She remained where the cameras could see her, cradling her children against her chest, her calmness a striking contrast to the chaos unraveling around her. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She didn't need to. Silence, she discovered, could be louder than fury. Inside the theater, whispers spread among guests. Some slipped out the side exits, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Others stayed, drawn by the spectacle, curious to witness the unraveling of a man who had built his life on illusion. Evelyn sat stiffly beside him, her smile brittle, her hand trembling in her lap. The cameras captured every flicker of doubt in her eyes, every inch she leaned away from him. For once, the world wasn't blinded by his polish. They saw him as he was, a man cornered, defensive, cracking under pressure. His empire wasn't collapsing because of her words. It was collapsing because of his own. When the film finally began, the applause was thin, scattered. Half the audience was outside, still pressing for quotes. By the time the credits rolled, no one was talking about the movie. They were talking about her. The next morning, newspapers screamed across every front page, "Millionaire's secret family exposed at premiere. Betrayed wife returns with children. Actress silent as scandal erupts." She read them quietly at her kitchen table while her babies napped. Their faces were blurred in the photographs, but hers was clear, steady, composed, unbroken. The world finally saw her, not as the insecure woman he had painted, but as the survivor she had become. Calls flooded in. Journalists begged for interviews. Television shows offered platforms. Lawyers hinted at settlements. She ignored them all. She hadn't come for attention. She hadn't come for revenge in the form of headlines. She had come for truth, and the truth was already undeniable. One evening, as she pushed a stroller down a quiet street, An old neighbor approached hesitantly. "I saw the news," the woman said softly. "I should have believed you." "I'm sorry," the wife smiled faintly. "Don't be. Belief isn't what saved me. What did?" She adjusted the blanket over her babies. "Survival." The word lingered in the air, heavy and liberating all at once. Behind closed doors, his world continued to crumble. Business partners withdrew. Investors paused. Evelyn canceled appearances, her silence speaking louder than denial. Lawsuits brewed in whispers, and his once flawless reputation lay in ruins. He tried to fight back with statements, insisting she had ambushed him, painted lies, manipulated the press. But each denial only deepened the cracks. The photographs told the story better than she ever could. His face twisted in anger, hers serene, the children undeniable. And she never once responded. She didn't stand behind podiums, didn't give interviews, didn't publish memoirs. She simply lived, raised her children, walked past cameras without a word. Her silence became its own form of justice, because the world filled in the blanks for her. They told the story she didn't need to tell. They saw the betrayal, the arrogance, the cruelty, and in contrast, they saw her strength. Late at night, when the babies finally slept and the house grew still, she allowed herself one thought, not of revenge, not of bitterness, but of release. He had taken so much from her, years, friends, love, but he hadn't destroyed her. He had only forced her to become someone stronger than he ever imagined. She stood by the window, the city lights flickering in the distance, her reflection ghosted against the glass. Her children stirred softly in the other room, anchors pulling her into a future no longer defined by him. She whispered into the quiet, "I survived." And sometimes, survival itself was the sharpest blade, the cleanest revenge. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from.